Hello and welcome to Call of the Senate, a podcast presented by the Minnesota Senate DFL Caucus. I'm Luke Bishop. Minnesota's sexual assault laws are long overdue for an update, and members of both the House and Senate have been working on a number of reforms so far this session. Here on today's episode to talk about it are Senators Sandy Pappas and Carla Bigham. Here's their conversation.
Well, and I am so pleased to be here today, folks, with the legendary State Senator Sandy Pappas, who is just been not only a mentor to me, but to many, many women that have come and gone through the Senate. But she has been such a champion of women's rights and survivor rights and of sexual assault, of physical abuse, of domestic violence. So today, we both serve on the Judiciary Committee here in the Senate. And we're going to talk about some of the legislation that has been a haul to pass. I'm not going to lie, it's been a little difficult, but we're going to talk about some pieces of legislation that really are long overdue. So, Senator Pappas, thank you for being on the Call of the Senate.
And thank you for being on the Call of the Senate to Senator Bingham.
One of the just amazing bills that we've done this year whole in what they call voluntary intoxication related to sexual assault. Why don't you talk a little bit about the rationale for why we need to make the change?
Sure. So our chair, as Carla and I both know, Senator Limmer, is very reluctant to hear any kind of criminal justice reform. And that includes things that have broad stakeholder support and broad bipartisan support, issues on sexual assault. And there was a task force on criminal sexual assault, and we wanted to hear what their recommendations were. And so we've kind of pushed him to have a hearing on this. And we actually did have a 3-hour hearing with Senator Bingham and Senator Latz, who's also on the committee, who's a Democratic lead. One of the issues that really needed to be addressed was this Supreme Court ruling that happened about voluntary intoxication. So there was a glitch in the law that said that women who voluntarily intoxicate cannot be considered mentally incapacitated, and therefore that's part of the charge against someone who commits sexual assault or rape. And I mean, that's such a gross injustice, and it's such a trope about women that if they get drunk, if they dress too sexy, if they're out alone at night, if they go to a bar, they deserve whatever happens to them. And that's totally not true. No woman deserves this kind of treatment. So part of the issue was to close that loophole so that men who assault women who are drunk can be held accountable for that. So that was one great victory that we did have in committee.
Yeah, and what a great coalition of advocates. You had MNCASA, you had
Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yep, and too often we get caught up in the acronyms because we're used to saying it, but that's a good point. Whether it was the survivors that have survived sexual assault came to testify, which was extremely powerful. But legal folks, prosecutors and public defenders, just a whole coalition of folks that came together to make these recommendations.
Right, absolutely.
And
Carla, why don't you talk about, a couple of the bills that you've been doing on this issue?
Sure. So one of the other bills that is in the Judiciary Omnibus bill deals with reporting of sexual assault that occurs between two members of the National Guard. When you think of like the Navy, there's JAG, Sandy, and so they have a legal department there to be able to investigate and report crimes to. Well, the National Guard doesn't have that. And so actually Senator Duckworth's bill, but the Democrats amended it onto this bill because it wasn't included. It's very bipartisan.
You know what, Carla, something you mentioned is really important is that Republicans have been authoring a lot of these bills, chief authoring in the Senate, but they don't push them forward. They don't get hearings. Senator Limmer doesn't hear his own members' bills. And so we've had to step up and push these bills forward, which is what you've done.
Absolutely. And I think that we have got this amendment on that makes the BCA kind of the reporting industry, the reporting agency for any sexual assault that would need to be investigated or pursued between two National Guardmen. So I think that that's important. The other one, which came from the Netflix documentary Athlete A, deals with who would be a mandatory reporter for youth that have come forward to say that they've been sexually assaulted or abused. It really comes from the United States Olympic gymnastics team and what happened with Dr. Nasser, who has hundreds of survivors. He created hundreds of victims. And what had happened is an athlete who resided here in Minnesota had been assaulted, and then one of the coaches had heard about it and reported it to the mother and to the Olympic organization, and was told that it was going to be taken care of. Well, it never was, and therefore more victims were created. And so this expands that coaches and people that are involved with youth, like youth camps or different things like that, youth organizations, now will be mandatory reporters if we pass this bill. And it's in both the judiciary bill that's in conference committee now. It did come in on both the House and the Senate side. And then Senator Pappas, there's another bill that you offered on the floor when we were debating the judiciary bill. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's interesting because the whole issue of the statute of limitations on sexual assault, meaning if you don't file if you don't get a prosecutor to file the assault charge within a narrow window, I think it's 7 years, although it varies on the crime, then forget it. You have no chance to get any kind of justice. So that just didn't seem like right to me. So for a number of years, I've been authoring this bill. But this year, Senator Senjum, a Republican from Rochester, was the author, and Senator Limmer wouldn't hear his bill and wouldn't pass it and include it in the omnibus bill. So I did offer a floor amendment. And I think the Republicans saw the handwriting on the wall. They knew that this was not a good bill to vote against. And so Senator Benson did rise and did say that if I withdrew the roll call, where I was trying to hold people accountable for their vote, that she would support the bill. And I felt then that we had Republican support. And so we all basically voted for it. So that was a really good victory. And for us who are in the minority, boy, it's not easy to get victories. And that was a major one.
And I think between conference committee and the floor, this is big, like that we've been able to get these reforms through. And again, they're both in the House and the Senate provisions that are currently being negotiated in conference committee, which, if they're both in there, there's a good chance that it's going to survive. And so I think that that's important. But Senator Pappas, there is a couple other provisions that didn't get hearings that, man, have you been a champion of in all your years of being here? And that's some of the ERA stuff, the Equal Rights Amendment stuff. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and the frustration that 2021, Senator Pappas,
100 years, 100 years since women's suffrage.
And we still can't get this passed.
Still can't get it. The Equal Rights Amendment, absolutely. We had a little victory in 2015. I had a resolution to Congress that they should lift the artificial deadline they had on the ratification. That deadline came, and we only had 35 out of the needed 38 states to ratify the national ERA, and so it went away. This was in the early 1970s, and there have been efforts to revitalize that. We have 3 additional states now that have ratified, but Congress needs to make a decision about this deadline date. Meanwhile, here in Minnesota, so we passed that resolution in 2015, bipartisan support in the Senate, but the House didn't take it up that year. So meanwhile, putting the ERA in the Minnesota Constitution is something that was championed for many, many years by retired Senator Dick Cohen.
Correct.
And I took up the charge this year along with newly elected Senator Mary Kunesh, who'd carried it in the House. But we couldn't get a hearing. In civil law, where you're the lead Democrat on that committee. And again, this has had popular support, had bipartisan support. It was championed early on by Republicans. It was in the Republican platform for many years. So it's really amazing that we haven't been able to get this passed. And of course, our beloved Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she did take a lot of issues on women's equality to the Supreme Court, won some, lost some, because we didn't have an ERA.
Right. And that's it's just incredible to me that anybody would find this controversial. We are going to have a woman governor here someday, and our Constitution also doesn't specify in gender neutral terms. So when she becomes governor, that probably will be a first bill that will have to be out the gate to codify.
Well, let's hope we get it done before that, because I'm not holding my breath over that, Carla.
Right.
But tell us what today is special for now.
So today is the Remembrance Day of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, and there are hundreds of Indigenous women that go missing, and just we don't know what's happened. Their families are without closure, and it's just unbelievably tragic. And our friend, Senator Mary Kunesh, tried, as well as you in committee and Senator Kunesh on the floor, to appropriate money to fund an office that would help
implement the recommendations from the task force,
and be a satellite to help bring services and needed resources to locating some of these women. And so today's that Remembrance Day. But one other point I would say why this office is needed is because Secretary of Interior Hollins, the first Native woman that will be a Native to be a secretary, is starting a federal office. And so we would be able to partner with the federal office and make even more efficiency out of the resources available. So it really needs to happen. It's in the House bill, and it's currently being deliberated in the conference committee. So let's hope that makes it through. But this has been a joy, and appreciate your time and your advocacy on all these issues.
The feeling is mutual, Senator Bingham.
And we thank everybody who is listening to the Call of the Senate. Tune in for new episodes of this wonderful podcast put on by the Senate DFL.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us today on Call of the Senate. Find us online at senatedfl.mn or on social media under the username @SenateDFL. See you next week.